Laughing aloud now, magic in the air. Wands roll around us, cast away our care. Friends in the hallways, adventures we find. Spells and enchantments, trouble on our mind. That's so wizardful. Life is a
4th edition Dungeons and Dragons should have been Eberon. And here's why. So this happens about once a year, every year since 2008, where people remember that they hate 4th edition. Nobody's actually sure why they hate 4th edition. They just hate 4th edition. And not like, I hate 5e, hate 4th edition, or I hate broccoli for hate, but no, just seething, unbelievable, I will destroy all life as we know it hate. Like 4th edition came into their house and kicked their dog hate. And a lot of that hate is understandable because let's face it, from beginning, middle to end, Wizards of the Coast fucked the dog at every possible moment in every possible way with 4th edition, from the inception to its final dying breath. Like we always talk about how if you want a crash course and how not to run a business, Wizards of the Coast, but this is where it started. I mean, some would say 3.5 is where the downward spiral of insanity started, but really, really, really just for abject, first grade business running, basic essentials, idiocy, every possible thing, every choice they made with 4th edition was wrong. And I have continuously said, much to a lot of backlash, that the problem could have been resolved very easily by making 4th edition Eberon or Magic the Gathering, the role-playing game. And people have yelled at me and they said, well, no, because, you know, Eberon came out in X and 4th edition came out in Y. So already time had been passed and, you know, that was stupid. And why would they make it Eberon? But I understand all that. I understand that there was a time gap, like 4 years, but still follow my logic here and see if at the end you agree with me or disagree with me. And I do this every year because it comes up about this time every year that we hate 4E. And every year I'm like, yeah, everything they did is wrong, but here is an alternate universe where had they done this, it might have worked better, right? And I mean, I use Eberon as the example because it was still relatively recent. And the 4th edition video game engine really works well with a more over-the-top, you know, style like Eberon had. It could have also been the Magic the Gathering role-playing game or Mastaka or any other setting. But they called it Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, and that was the beginning of the end. So this is how if I was omnipresent and could go back in time and whisper in the ears of Wizards of the Coast, would have handled it. So you announced that there's a new edition coming out, and there's grumblings and complainings and blah, 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 blah. And without any warning or anything else, they just dropped the 4th edition on D&D players, while in the same breath pretty much set 3rd edition on fire. So that's how badly they handled the introduction to 4th edition. It came out of nowhere. It was completely different than anything we'd ever seen before. We had no build-up, no play testing, just suddenly, and then also in the same breath, they went after 3rd edition and just tried to eliminate it. So you had to play 4th edition or else. Except, of course, Pathfinder came out. But starting with that, rewind, get in the TARDIS, go back in time, announce we are making a new system. It is different than 3.5. We're going to release that system as the Eberon role-playing game. It is going to be set in the world of Eberon. We're going to restart Eberon with this new system, or Magic the Gathering, or anything that wasn't D&D. Just not use D&D. Just tag another name to it. I just use Eberon because it seems to fit. You know, we call 4th edition the steampunk version of D&D. We call it the World of Warcraft D&D. We call it the, video game version of D&D. So there was a lot of fantasy settings that would have worked better. Could have been Diablo, but I think Eberon works for the mechanics and how 4E played out. So you introduce Eberon using this new system. You don't, D&D 3.5, you're slowly fading out. But you let them know that here's a brand new system. And you let them know, we're play testing for the new system and we're using it as Eberon. So Eberon is your chance to check out the new system. We're not doing anything with Dungeons and Dragons yet. We're starting with Eberon. And we're setting it in Eberon. We're restarting Eberon. We're using this new system, all the stuff that 4E had in the engine. And you do that for about a year. You have the core rule books at the beginning of the year. You have a 4-part adventure path through the year. And then at the end of that year, you ask people, what did you think of this system? You've had a year or longer to play with it. We've slowly fading out 3.5. Now, we've been testing other things behind the scenes just in case, but what do you think of this system? At this point, you've had a good sizable group of people playing around with the 4th edition engine, the Eberon engine, the Magic the Gathering, World of Warcraft, D&D, the video game engine, for about a year, right? Maybe it's not that large of a group, but it's large enough that you can get not only a sampling, but by the process of how D&D spreads through osmosis, other people who have read about it, talked about it, seen it, and then those people, so by the end of the year, you've got a couple thousand people who have across the world had a chance to test this system. So at the end of the year, after testing the 4th edition engine for using Eberon, they could have asked everybody who had a chance to play it, what did you think? And really get into what they liked, what they did like. Not like those half-assed questions they did for the 5e and 6e playtests, but really get deep into what they liked and didn't like about the engine. And if they love the engine for 4th edition, which I know I'm in a minority, but I actually do like the engine for 4th edition. All right. What do you guys think if we made that the new D&D? And after having a year to test it out, people would have either said, oh my God, this is a perfect system for D&D. Yes, make 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons using the engine that we've played with for the last year. Or they could have said, no, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Do not make this Dungeons and Dragons. Do something else with it or throw it away, but it doesn't work for Gygaxian level-based fantasy. Wizards of the Coast could then have gone, okay, we've play tested this for a year. It doesn't work. Let's try something else. The Magic the Gathering, the role-playing game didn't work. Let's just streamline and represent 3.5 as a new system, similar to what would have become Pathfinder had they, stayed in the good graces of the company that would have eventually become Paizo instead of how they treated Paizo. That's a topic for a separate thing. But who knows? That wouldn't have happened, which means those people would still be working for Wizards, which means they would have hardly been working on the system that we now know as Pathfinder, which means that in this alternate universe, Wizards could have gone, okay, Eberon didn't work. Let's try this. And then you release that. And maybe you use a different setting. Or maybe you say, yeah, here it is. We're play testing this. What do you think of this new system? So either the people loved the 4th edition engine as set in the Eberon, Magic the Gathering, whatever, steampunk universe, and then Wizards could have said, okay, this is the new version of D&D. And people would have been like, yes, we loved it. We had a year to test it out. We loved it. Because let's face it, one of the many mistakes Wizards made with 4th edition is they didn't give us any warning. You didn't give us a chance to play it out. As opposed to previously, when you switched editions, you did. The Avatar trilogy being a perfect example, even though that wasn't Wizards, that was TSR, but still, the Avatar trilogy is a perfect example of how you slowly graduated from one system to another over a fucking year. So by the end of the Avatar trilogy module series, you had a complete understanding of the new rules and how the Forgotten Realms has changed. And they kind of did something with 3.5 with the Apocalypse Stones, but not as vast as the Avatar trilogy. But it set the precedence that works, which they didn't do with 4E. There was no slow introduction. It came out of nowhere without warning. And it was so drastically different. Using my alternate universe, we would have had that same year-long testing the waters of the system, the slow transformation from one system to the other, at the end of which they could have said, all right, you've had a year to play with the Eberon role-playing game, the Magic the Gathering role-playing game, the whatever they called it. What do you think? We love it. Great. That's the new D&D. Great. Thank you. Let's go. Or we hate it. Well, okay. Throw that away, save it for something else. What do you think of this system? You know, I mean, it's not like they would have not been doing something else behind, but they would have been banking on that engine anyways. So why not introduce that engine in a less offensive way so that we got a chance to play with it without ever thinking this was D&D? Again, I'm just using Eberon as the example, but it could have been anything. It just did not need to be Dungeons and Dragons, and we needed that time to get used to it. We needed that time to understand the transition from old rules to new rules, and whether we felt it worked with Gygaxian D20 level best fantasy or not, which Wizards of the Coast didn't give us, which is part of the many reasons why we hate 4th E. So now we have had tested this universe, and we've either like, oh yeah, we love the system, let's go, and 4E is basically the engine as we know it, or we hated it, at which point they show us another rule set, maybe something akin to 5E or akin to Pathfinder, but something we're more familiar with in the terms of Gygaxian D20 level-based fantasy. The next obvious evolution of 3.5, a lot of people say 3.6, 3.15, Pathfinder. Initial Pathfinder was the next logical evolution. Others say, well, 5E before it got stupid was the next obvious evolution. There was an obvious evolution that the path of the system should have taken to get us to fourth edition. They did not choose that path for reasons that still escape everybody. They chose the stupidest path possible, as if they wanted 4th edition to fail from day one to its final day. Everything they did was wrong. But they could have given us a chance to get used to it. And the way I suggest is to introduce it as a different game. Fuck, make it Marvel, make it a superhero game, make it a space game, make it a cyberpunk game, make it anything other than D&D. Make it a year of Eberon playtesting this system. And at the end of that Eberon year, you go, does this the new D&D system or not? I think had they done that, we wouldn't have ended up hating 4th edition as much as we do. Because we have had a chance to get used to it, and we've either had a chance to say, yes, we love this, or no, we don't. Sadly, that universe doesn't exist. It just crashed under the snap of Thanos' fingers. And instead, we have what we have, which was the beginning of the end for the relationship between Wizards of the Coast and its fan base. All the anger we have today towards Wizards can be traced back, well, to 3.5, but really to 4th, and the way they handled 4th. And then they just continued with that mentality into 5th. Now, 5th started out pretty good back when Mike was still in charge of it. But the second Mike Merles was gone, there was already rumblings. And that rumblings just became a volcano of anger, which still exists to this day. And Wizards, in its infinite wisdom, chooses to not do anything to fix that anger. So there you go. There's my weird alternate universe. I know people don't agree with me. I know people have said it's dumb in the past, but let's just toss it out there that there's some alternate universe where Wizards actually made smart choices regarding 4th edition and the way to introduce the fan base, the transition from 3 to 4. Let's say they did do something similar to the Apocalypse Stones or the Avatar trilogy, where they gave us a different way to test it. They gave us a different universe. They gave us a different site. They gave us a year-long transitional story with a system that used the best of 4th edition, all the new weird rules. I mean, it's what I would have done. I think it's what most of us would have done. But for reasons that I or nor anybody else understand, Wizards of the Coast decided to just come in and say, let's do everything we possibly can to make people hate us. And then let's never back down or apologize or do anything to to fix that damage. In fact, let's just keep, every time we open our mouths, do something to widen that gap. We really want our fans to hate us. So there you go. I do this every year. I'll do it again next year. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day. Why does Wizards of the Coast make these stupid decisions? 'Cause
laughing aloud now, magic in the air. Wands swirl around us, cast away our care. Friends in the hallways, adventures we find. Spells and enchantments, trouble on our mind. That's so wizard for